There's a video that went viral a few years ago. A bottlenose dolphin off the coast of Kona, Hawaii, swims directly toward a group of divers in the middle of the night. The water is dark. The divers are there to watch manta rays feed on plankton under bright underwater lights. And out of nowhere, this dolphin appears, circling them slowly, rolling onto its side, almost presenting itself. At first, nobody understands what's happening. Then, the diver closest to it, a man named Keller Laros, sees the problem. There's a fishing line wrapped tightly around the dolphin's left pectoral fin. A metal hook is buried deep in the flesh. The line is cutting into the animal's body, restricting its movement, slowly killing it. And the dolphin just floats there. It doesn't thrash, it doesn't bolt, it hovers in front of Laros, completely still, while he pulls out a dive knife and carefully begins to cut the line free. The whole rescue takes about 4 minutes. For a dolphin, an animal that depends on surfacing to breathe, 4 minutes of staying still near a stranger with a blade is an eternity. When the line finally comes loose, the dolphin turns and disappears into the black water without a sound. Nobody trained that dolphin to approach a human. Nobody conditioned it to associate people with help. It was a wild animal living in open ocean, and when it ran out of options, it swam toward the one species on the planet that might be able to solve its problem. That moment raises a question most people never stop to think about. Why would a wild animal, an animal that has every reason to fear humans, every reason to flee from us, instead choose to come closer? Let's be clear about something. In the natural world, approaching a human is one of the most dangerous things an animal can do. We are, by any honest accounting, the most destructive species on Earth. We've driven thousands of species to extinction. We've burned forests, poisoned oceans, and built weapons that can level entire ecosystems. Every large predator on the planet has learned, through generations of experience, that humans are unpredictable, violent, and best avoided entirely. And yet, when the situation gets desperate enough, some of those same animals override everything evolution has drilled into them and walk, swim, or fly straight toward us. Not to attack, not to defend territory, to ask for something. The cases are more common than you'd expect, and they span nearly every kind of animal you can think of. In 2013, a wild raven landed on a man's fence in what appeared to be rural Russia and started squawking. It didn't stop for over an hour. When the man finally walked over to investigate, he found 3 porcupine quills buried in the bird's face and one lodged deep in its wing. The raven didn't flinch when the man reached for it. It stood perfectly still while each quill was pulled out one by one. And when the last one was removed, the bird looked at the man for a long moment, then flew off into the trees. Ravens are corvids. They belong to the same family as crows, magpies, and jays, a group of birds that scientists now believe possess cognitive abilities comparable to a 7-year-old human child. They use tools. They solve multi-step puzzles. They plan for the future. They recognize individual human faces and remember them for years. A raven sitting on a fence, screaming for attention, isn't acting on blind instinct. It has the cognitive architecture to recognize that something is wrong with its own body, that it cannot fix it alone, and that the large bipedal creature nearby might be able to do something about it. That's not desperation alone. That's calculation. And corvids aren't the only ones doing it. In the waters off Costa Rica, divers from a group called Oceano Video Sub were exploring near the Bat Islands when a massive manta ray appeared and swam directly toward them. Manta rays can weigh close to 5,000 pounds and span up to 18 feet across. They are not small animals, and they are not social with humans. But this one came in close, circling the divers, rolling its body to expose a thick tangle of fishing line that was wrapped around it and cutting deep into its skin. One of the divers carefully cut the line free. The manta swam away. Researchers in the Maldives have documented this same behavior happening repeatedly. Entangled mantas approaching divers, circling them as if presenting the problem, and then holding. Still, while humans work to free them. Even though removing the line causes pain, the animals endure it. They seem to understand on some level that the short-term suffering leads to a long-term fix. Now, the skeptic's argument here is reasonable. Maybe these animals aren't really asking for help. Maybe they're just slowing down because they're exhausted, and humans happen to be nearby. Maybe the stillness isn't trust. Maybe it's its resignation. That's fair, but it doesn't hold up when you look at the cases where animals actively seek out humans they've never encountered before, travel significant distances to find them, and behave in ways that are completely inconsistent with their normal survival instincts. In 2014, 3 wild elephants walked across the Kenyan savanna with poison-tipped arrows buried in their sides. They'd been targeted by poachers. The wounds were severe, and instead of retreating deeper into the bush, which is what injured elephants almost always do, these 3 walked in a specific direction. They walked toward the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust's Itumba Reintegration Center, a facility that rescues and rehabilitates orphaned elephants. Here's the part that matters. Only one of the 3 elephants had any connection to the center. That one had previously mated with 2 elephants who had been raised and released from the facility. The other 2 had never been near it. Somehow, the one elephant with a memory of humans who helped led 2 strangers to the same place, as if it understood not just that help existed, but where to find it. That's not instinct. That's memory, communication, and an understanding that humans in this specific place are different from humans in other places. Elephants have the largest brains of any land animal, weighing roughly 10.5 pounds. They have about 3 times as many neurons as humans in certain brain regions associated with complex behavior. They mourn their dead. They recognize themselves in mirrors. They remember locations, individuals, and events across decades. An elephant remembering a place where it was treated well and returning to that place when it's hurt isn't magical thinking. It's exactly what you'd expect from an animal with that level of cognitive power. But the fact that it then brought others, animals with no prior experience of human kindness, suggests something even more remarkable. It suggests that elephants can communicate concepts like safety and help across individuals. There is one species on Earth that has taken this relationship even further, and it may be the most extraordinary example of a wild animal deliberately seeking out human cooperation that science has ever documented. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, there's a small, brown, completely unremarkable-looking bird called the greater honeyguide. It eats beeswax. That's its primary food. The problem is, bees build their nests in hard-to-reach places, and those nests are defended by thousands of stinging insects. The honeyguide knows where the nests are, but can't get inside them. Humans want the honey inside those nests, but can't find them, so the 2 species made a deal. And it wasn't a deal that any human taught. It evolved through natural selection over thousands of years. The honeyguide has a special call it uses only when it wants to recruit a human partner. It flies to a person, calls loudly, then leads them from tree to tree, guiding them through the bush to the exact location of a wild bee colony. The humans follow, subduing the bees with smoke and chopping open the nest with axes. The humans take the honey guide eats the exposed wax and grubs. In 2016, evolutionary biologist Claire Spottiswoode from Cambridge University published a landmark study in the journal Science, showing that honey guides don't just respond to any human sounds, they recognize and respond to culturally specific calls made by local honey hunters. In Mozambique, the Yao people use a distinctive sound, a loud trill, followed by a grunt to summon the birds. Spottiswoode's experiments showed that when she played the traditional Yao honey hunting call, the probability of being guided by a honey guide to a bee's nest more than tripled compared to playing other human sounds or bird calls. The birds had learned the meaning of a specific human vocalization and associated it with cooperation. Research published by Brian Wood and colleagues found that among the Hadza people of northern Tanzania, honey guides increased the rate of finding bee nests by 560%. The birds didn't just lead hunters to any nests, they led them to higher yielding ones. An estimated 8 to 10% of the Hadza's total diet came from partnerships with honey guides. This isn't an animal stumbling toward humans out of desperation. This is a wild species that evolved an entire behavioral system built around recruiting human help. And it's been happening for at least 20,000 years, possibly longer, making it one of the oldest cooperative relationships between humans and any wild animal on Earth. But what happens when desperation isn't chronic? What happens in a sudden crisis? The answer came in the worst possible way during Australia's catastrophic bushfire season of 2019 and 2020. More than 27 million acres burned. Scientists estimated that over 1 billion individual animals died. And in the aftermath, something happened that rescue workers described as haunting. Animals that would normally flee from humans at any distance began walking toward them. Koalas, animals that are slow-moving and almost entirely arboreal, were found sitting on the ground near roads, near houses, near people, too dehydrated and starving to climb. Kangaroos with burned feet hobbled toward water stations that humans had set up. Wombats, which are naturally reclusive burrowers, were found sitting at the entrances of their burrows in a state that rescuers described as total shutdown, completely still, staring at nothing, as if waiting for something to change. Rescue teams from organizations like the Humane Society International described finding koalas curled up at the edge of waterholes beside the bodies of other koalas that had already died. They weren't hiding anymore. They were just sitting there, as if the instinct to flee had been overridden by something more primal, the need for water, for shade, for anything at all. The question underneath all of this is whether these animals are actually choosing to approach humans, or whether they're simply collapsing near us because we happen to be around when everything else is gone. And the honest answer is that science doesn't fully know, but there are patterns that make the purely coincidental explanation hard to accept. Dogs are perhaps the clearest lens for understanding this. Dogs are the only species on Earth that independently evolved the ability to read human gestures, not because we trained them to, but because the wolves that were less afraid of early humans got access to food scraps around campsites, survived at higher rates, and, over thousands of generations, became the animals we know today. Dogs don't just respond to commands. Studies show they follow human pointing gestures, something even chimpanzees struggle with. They look at the right side of a human's face first, the same side we look at when reading emotions in other people. They can detect changes in human cortisol levels through smell and respond with behavioral changes that researchers describe as empathic. A dog approaching a crying stranger isn't confused. It's reading a chemical and behavioral signal that it has been evolutionarily shaped to respond to. But wild animals haven't had 14,000 years of domestication. So when a wild dolphin approaches a diver, or a raven screams at a stranger until its quills are removed, or a manta ray circles a human and presents its wound, something else is at work. And the best explanation science currently has is this. Many animals are significantly more intelligent than we've historically given them credit for. They observe. They remember, they associate. A wild elephant that was once held by humans in a particular place remembers that place and what happened there, possibly for the rest of its life. A crow that watches a human offer food learns that not all humans are threats. A dolphin that has seen divers in its waters hundreds of times may have built a mental model of what humans can do, even if it doesn't understand why. There is a concept in animal behavior called social learning, the ability to acquire new behavior by observing others rather than through direct experience. It's been documented in primates, cetaceans, elephants, corvids, and even some fish, and some researchers believe it may explain how certain populations of wild animals develop a kind of cultural knowledge
about humans. Not every animal in a population approaches people, but the ones that do and survive may pass that behavioral tendency on. Not genetically necessarily, but socially, through observation, through memory, through whatever mechanism allows one elephant to lead two strangers to a place where humans once helped. There's a deeper layer here, one that makes this whole subject feel less like animal science and more like something philosophical. Evolution doesn't usually reward vulnerability. Running toward a potential predator is, in almost every scenario, a terrible survival strategy. And yet, across species as different as dolphins and elephants, ravens and manta rays, the behavior keeps showing up. Animals that are injured, entangled, poisoned, starving, or lost, choosing to approach the one species on the planet with the power to either save them or destroy them. And more often than not, when they take that risk, we help. We cut the fishing line. We pull the quills. We carry the orphan to a sanctuary. We set up water stations in burned-out forests. We follow the bird to the honey. Maybe the most unsettling part of all this isn't that animals come to us for help. It's that in almost every one of these stories, the reason they needed help in the first place was because of us. The fishing line around the dolphin's fin was ours. The arrows in the elephant's side were ours. The fire that burned the koala's forest was fueled by a climate we destabilized. The rope around the whale shark's body was ours. We built the world that's hurting them. And then, when they come to us, bleeding and desperate, we act surprised that they knew where to find us. There is something happening between humans and wild animals that science is only beginning to understand. It isn't domestication. It isn't training. It isn't coincidence. It's something quieter, something older, something built on thousands of years of shared space and observation. A slow, accumulating awareness on both sides that we are bound together in ways neither species fully controls. The honey guide didn't sign a contract with the Yao people. The elephant didn't fill out an intake form at the Sheldrick Trust. The dolphin didn't Google how to find a diver. They just knew. Or maybe they didn't know. Maybe they just had no other option and took the only chance left. But the fact that the chance existed, the fact that in the middle of the ocean, or the savanna, or the burning bush, there was a human who would stop and help, that isn't nothing. That's a relationship. One that's been evolving for longer than civilization has existed, and one that we are only now starting to take seriously enough to study. The next time an animal looks at you, really looks at you, not with fear, not with aggression, but with something that feels like a request, consider the possibility that you're not imagining it. Consider the possibility that across the vast distance between your species and theirs, something is being communicated. Something simple, something ancient, something that sounds, if you listen closely enough, a lot like help. If this made you think differently about the living world around you, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the strangest, most beautiful questions nature has to offer.